Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to welcome you to Georgian Court University, and I'm also happy to follow Beatrice Shoemaker's presentation that gives you some background information on the Teahouse here at Georgian Court University and its rich history. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about the Teahouse and the Tea Garden from the period of 1910 to 2024. So first, we'd like to look at the garden in context and look at the Gould estate history and the four Gould-era gardens that were created from the late 1890s to 1910. Before we move into the Gould era, though, we should acknowledge the original inhabitants of the Gould estate, and they were the Lenape Native Americans. And you can see that our story takes place today mostly in Lakewood, where the Big Red Star is, and also to the north of us, just about 90 minutes to the north, is New York City. And both of these locales are important to the story of the Georgian Court Tea House and Tea Garden. George and Edith Gould moved to Lakewood in the late 1890s, and Lakewood at that time was a winter resort for the rich and famous. And they moved here and had 7 children. They sold their estate to the Sisters of Mercy in 1923, which will pick up the next 100 years of the history. So everything that we have today, that is the rich history of the Georgian Court Tea House and Garden, really originates during the time when the Goulds were here in the late 1890s and the early 1920s. In the late 1890s, when the Goulds bought the land in Lakewood, they wanted to create an estate in the Georgian style of architecture, and they engaged the architect Bruce Price to design the buildings in the Georgian architectural style and 3 European-style symmetrical gardens. And this is just an aerial view of what used to be the estate that is now the campus of Georgian Court University. The biggest of the 3 original formal European gardens that were designed by Bruce Price is the Italian garden that is half a kilometer long and features conifers, centuries-old sculptures, statues, and urns, as you can see in this photo. I also want to point out that this garden is very symmetrical. It is flat. It is covered with a lot of green space and has very predictable structure. It looks pretty much the same from all different angles. And that is in contrast to what we will see later with the Japanese garden. This is another shot of the Italian gardens, showing at the center the gargantuan eagle dragon sculpture that was commissioned for the German pavilion at the 1900 Paris World Fair. And the Goulds later bought it from Tiffany's in New York and had it moved to their estate to be put in the middle of the garden. Also, surrounding the eagle, you can see 4 large statues. These are the 4 Seasons statues. We also have urns and ornate chairs. Most of the vegetation in the gardens are conifers, moss cypress, pitch pine, and shortleaf pine. At the foot of the Italian gardens is the very large Apollo fountain that was a birthday gift from George to his wife Edith and was sculpted by the Scottish-American sculptor John Massey Rhind in 1902. If we move to one of the other European-style gardens, we have the formal garden, which is in front of the mansion. The mansion in this image is at the top of the photo. This is where the Goulds lived. And opposite the mansion, in the bottom center of the slide, are the formal garden, individual garden beds. And you can see there are 18 symmetrical flower beds, 3 groups of 5, and a group of 3 in the middle. And this is in the French parterre garden style that originated in the around the 1500 in Europe. The formal garden has in the center a sundial with satyrs at the base, and this is a copy of a fountain from Versailles. And in this photo, you can see it's surrounded by irises. The garden also includes peonies, lavender, Russian sage, and American holly. The third of the European-style gardens is the large sunken garden with its huge marble staircases, lagoon, and the vegetation here is mostly moss cypress trees, English ivy, and Montauk daisies. And again, you have the symmetrical European-style grand formal garden. To the entrance of the sunken garden is a fountain on the right from 17th century France, again in the classical style. and the marble lions on the left. The marble was like the Gould family symbol. Now, moving on to something completely different, and the reason we're actually all here today, we have the fourth Gould era garden, which is the Japanese garden. And this was a birthday gift from George Gould to his wife, Edith. It was designed by Takeo Shiota in 1907. And Beatrice talked a bit about him in her video. He designed the Brooklyn Botanical Garden, Japanese garden in 1914. He designed the Georgian Court Garden in 1910. Our garden is a tea garden. It consists of 2,500 square meters of space covering about 6.6 acres and has the tea house from the 1910 Japan-British exhibition in London. The garden is filled with all kinds of interesting features, including a waterfall, dry streams, 5 stone lanterns, 3 wooden bridges, a stone bridge, sukubai, mashii, Japanese maples, rhododendrons, irises, umbrella pines, cherries, yews, yucca, nandina, holly, camellias, and a lot of old native oaks and pines. An alumna-funded bridge gate and tea house restoration that was done by our architect, our carpenter, Peter Wexler, from 2014 to 2024. We are a proud member of the North American Japanese Garden Association. Of course, the tea tradition in Japan goes back many centuries and has been immortalized in many works of art, including this painting here, which shows 2 women arranging utensils for a tea ceremony. The room shown on the left of this slide is a mizuya, which is where the tea preparation takes place. And then this other slide shows guests seated to receive tea with the classical tea utensils and tea setup. And this is also by a Japanese artist done during the Meiji era. This postcard with the red box on it is courtesy of Beatrice Shoemaker. The presumed location of the tea house is shown in the red box near the top of the slide. As may have been mentioned by Beatrice, we do not have any actual photos of the tea house. We have looked all over the place for them, but have been unable to find them. But we do have this postcard that shows the location. So that's really what happened when the tea garden was constructed. Now let's move into a brief discussion of the tea house and tea garden after the Goulds left the campus. So in 1924, the Sisters of Mercy moved their campus that was known as Mount St. Mary's College and was founded in 1908 in North Plainfield, New Jersey, to Lakewood, New Jersey. They had bought the estate in 1923 from the Gould family after Mrs. Gould had died and Mr. Gould had remarried, and then he had died. The campus was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1985, and in 1989, the Sister Mary Grace Burns Arboretum was established by Mary Stockton, who's shown here in this photo, and it includes about 100 landscaped acres of the campus, and we have records for over 2,000 woody plants. 2004, we became Georgian Court University. Now, during that time that the Sisters of Mercy were here and actually living on campus, and the last of them moved off campus in 2015, they did take care of the original estate, including the Japanese garden and the tea house. And those efforts were largely led by Sister Mary Christina Geis, who's shown here seated with a corsage, signing in front of a copy of her book, Georgian Court in the State of the Gilded Age, which was published in 1982. And after Sister Christina left, but also overlapping with her to some extent, was Sister Mary Bilderback, who worked here until 2015. That brings us really to a tour of the garden today and what are its many features and how has it changed over time. So we're going to start with just the tour. So as we approach the garden, we go along this curvy path that will then cross this bridge with irises on either side that is basically a dry stream. And you can see the dry stream in this photo. You cross the bridge, go through the gate, and once you're in the inner garden, then you see the tea house. You'll notice the lantern and the large oak tree to the right. This is just another side view of the stream bed. Once you get inside, if you turn to the left when you're in the inner part of the garden, there's the mashii in the back, which is the waiting area, another stone lantern. And then if you turn to your right, you would see the sukubai, which has the bowl in the middle for washing hands and face to cleanse yourself before the tea ceremony. This is what the tea house looks like today from another part of the Japanese garden. And we're basically going to walk through the rest of the garden now virtually. So you can see the tea house here with the stone bridge between where the photographer is standing and the tea house itself. If you turn around and continue your way through the garden, you can either go to the left over this wooden bridge that goes to a small island that crosses over yet again another dry stream, or you can continue to the right and follow the gravelly path with the cedar posts lining it through the rest of the garden, which is what we're going to do. So as we go to the right, we go down the garden. As we see on the left here, the photo on the left, can cross over the dry stream, walk up the hill using the path shown in the right of the photo. When you get to the top of the hill, in front of the very large rock, is where, when the waterfall is turned on, the water cascades through the stones. There, off to the right, at the very top of the hill, there is a water source that can be turned on by a valve, and then the water will flow downward over the waterfall and into the dry stream bed. Once you reach the top of the hill, you then continue down back through the garden, and you'll notice where we're standing on the left, or actually standing where the water comes through for the waterfall. You'll see the Japanese maples on the left, a snow viewing lantern that you'll pass as you go down the path, and you continue to the bottom of the hill. As you do that, you pass the Japanese maples again, and you can see another wooden bridge where the dry stream is at the bottom of the hill. As you continue on this path, you'll get nice views of the tea house through the Japanese maples. And this is a view of the tea house in winter. And then finally, you reach the bottom of the hill. There's another view of the dry stream and the bridge at the bottom. And then you pass off to your left the tea house with a nice view of another stone lantern and the mashii. And you round the bend, passing the dry stream again that you passed on the way in. And exiting, you pass the Japanese maples. Now let's look at both the garden and the tea house over 100 years of their history and how have they changed over time. So on the left is a photo of the entrance to the garden that was in Takeo Shioda's 1916 book. And you'll see the gate is there along with the bamboo fence, the stone lantern, and the oak tree. And if you compare that to the way things look today, you can see that basically we're looking at the same structure and features in the garden, although the tree is, of course, much bigger, but the stone lantern is still off to the right to the entrance. Because the fences were bamboo and wood, they have decayed over time and been replaced by another fence. Looking at the mashii, on the left is a photo from Takeo Shioda's book. You can see the mashii and the stone lantern, and on the right is the way the same image looks today. Basically the same, except the fences are missing that were there at that time. The Goulds were quite famous in society, and so many articles were written about them. This is from the House and Garden magazine, which does not exist anymore, but this is an issue from December 1916, and you can see the tea house and the gate and the garden, of course, which at that time is only 6 years old, the vegetation in it. This shows the same image on the left with the way the tea house looked last week. Through the trees. And again, the basic features are the same as the way they were in the early 1900s. Now, this was a birthday gift from George to his wife, Edith. So Mrs. Gould had it decorated this way, at least for the purposes of the 1916 House and Garden magazine. You can see a portrait in the back and lots of comfortable furniture. Slippers or flip-flops in the front, and the little bird off to the left in front of the chair. So it looks quite comfortable with all the pillows in it, but not at all the way a traditional tea house should look. This is what Mrs. Gould would have seen from the inside of the tea house as she looked out, the way it was decorated in that same issue of House and Garden magazine. And here's another photo of the tea house and garden from the magazine. You can see a stone bridge and the stone lanterns in the back, the young trees in the foreground, and the mature trees that were left on the campus when the garden was created in the early 1910 era period of time. This is from Takeo Shioda's 1916 book again, and this shows a staged photo of a woman dressed in kimono, and she is preparing tea in the traditional sense. It appears to be a scroll in the back, along with flowers or tea in the front where the tokonoma is, and she has put her shoes on this rock in the front. And so, of course, this is the way the tea house is supposed to look. Now, if we contrast that on the left with the way Mrs. Gould had it decorated, you can see that the inside was completely covered, all kinds of unusual things that would never have been found in the tea house the way it was originally designed. It's kind of interesting. These two were both published in the same year. Now we're just going to look at a few postcards from the Gould era versus the way things look today. Back in the time that the Goulds were here, they entertained a lot of people when people came here to show off that they had been at the Goulds, because of course cameras were still quite expensive and it was hard to get photographic images. People bought postcards of the garden and then they would send them to various people. So this is a postcard from the Gould era showing the Japanese garden with the two snow viewing lanterns at the top, and then we're exactly the same area the way it looks in a contemporary landscape. You can see the lanterns are in the same place. And again, we have the dry stream, which in the postcard at the top has water in it, or at least was colored, as they did that at that time with pigments to make it look like there was water. This is the same area, a different shot. On the left, you can see the young vegetation and all the snow viewing, all the various lanterns in the garden, along with some of the wooden bridges, and the way that same area looks today with the vegetation, of course, much more mature. This is Takeo Shioda's book showing the two stone lanterns at the top and the waterfall, and the same area today where you can see certainly the vegetation is a lot bigger. It obscures where the waterfall is, but the lanterns are in the same place. And we also have a wooden bridge in exactly the same spot. The rocks are also where they were at that time. Now, the garden has certainly seen the effects of weather over time. Probably the most dramatic event that we know of was the Superstorm Sandy in October of 2012. The big oak tree that you see in the foreground fell on top of three of what we believe to be the original Japanese maples and destroyed them. It also damaged the large rhododendron that you can see here in the front. The rhododendron did recover, but we had to get new Japanese maples. So the smaller ones that you see today in the garden, behind the large one that greets you at the entrance, were all planted in 2013, thanks to donations from alumni and other interested parties. Now, in the last 10 years, our carpenter, Peter Wexler, has been doing lots of work in the garden. And one of the things he started with actually was to replace the wooden bridges. You can see the biggest bridge here as it's being taken out of the garden and replaced with a new wooden bridge. This is the installation of that bridge, 2014, and then the way it looked after the bridge was installed. This is a second wooden bridge that was replaced in 2014. And then we also had to replace the cedar posts or kui in 2013 and again in 2022. There are about 1,000 of those in the garden. And Peter also rearranged the large rocks that constituted the sukubai because he told us that they were not really in the position that they should have been in in a Japanese garden. So after the sukubai was arranged, this is the way it looked. Now, Peter also did work on the interior of the tea house, and most of that work was done in about 2018, 2019. So before the work was completed, there was an old wooden bench in the front. The mats in the interior were actually ugly straw mats that were falling apart. They were not traditional tatami mats, and there was a lot of other work that needed to be done. You can see the window and the mizuya, which is at the small part of the tea house to the left is not a traditional lattice window, so Peter created that too. So during the process of that work, that's what the inside of the tea house looked like. You can see the wooden mat or the straw mats in the foreground. And this is a before and after shot. In the left is 2018. And the Mizuya, which had been actually nailed shut for all the time that I worked at Georgian Court, and probably a long time before that, so that was at least since 1992, Peter unsealed the Mizuya. And on the right, you can see that. And he also replaced the tatami, the straw mats with tatami, genuine mats imported with materials imported from Japan, and a hearth. And you can see that on the right also. So here's a before and after in 2018, and you can see on the left is the way the tea house looked before, and on the right, the way the tea house looks today, or pretty much today in the interior, with the genuine tatami mats and the scroll that was written by Dr. Sachiko Komagata that started hanging in the tea house starting in 2018. And this is the after photo, like the one that we looked at earlier, a few slides earlier. And then this just to compare the tea house in Takeo Shioda's book, 1916, with the way it looked after Peter completed his work. You can see the materials on the right. Peter also unsealed some of the windows that had been nailed shut. So that's a view from the inside of the garden out after that was done. And he also unnailed the back door to the tea house, which likewise had been sealed for many decades. In 2021, we bought genuine Japanese tea utensils for a permanent tea display that is visible to viewers all the time when they come to the tea house. And this is what it looks like with all the materials that should be present for the beginning of a tea ceremony. The most recent work in the tea house was done just a few weeks ago. In November of 2024, Peter removed the wallpaper that had been covering the walls and also replaced the ceiling. Both of those were thought to have been later additions to the tea house and were not original to the work. So this is the way it looked when that work was in process. And this is a before shot. And then an after shot with the removal of the wallpaper and the new wooden roof. So I would like to finish with some contemporary uses of the tea house from 2017 to the present. So in the fall of 2017, we held our inaugural semi-annual tea ceremony. And this had been instigated by a joint effort by Judith Kroll-Russo, who is the woman in red and is a certified tea expert, working with Dr. Sachiko Komagata, who is to her left, standing in the back, and she does a kimono demonstration as part of the program. And this is Judith explaining tea ceremony essentials to the students who came to the program. And this is Sachiko and Judith demonstrating a tamai, or how the tea is made during a tea ceremony. And we hold this in our mansion and then serve all of our guests tea and sweets, higashi, genuine Japanese tea sweets before this tea ceremony. We now hold this ceremony twice a year for both the public and students. The tea ceremony is open for other events. And here we have Yoshi Nagano as a master of the samurai tea ceremony style, making tea in the tea house May 1st, 2023, and the guests who enjoyed tea during the tea ceremony at that time. And I just want to finish here with these two beautiful photos of the garden in winter. And thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you get a chance to visit the tea house in person if you haven't been able to do that so far.